Okay, I want you to picture the scene. It's Tuesday. You're in Mogadishu. The sun is just hammering down on the tarmac at Aden Ad International Airport.
Mm.
You got those heat waves shimmering off the ground, and there's this very specific high-tension energy that you only get during a big diplomatic event.
Right. You can almost feel it.
Yeah, the red carpet's rolled out. You've got members of parliament standing around, kind of adjusting their ties, checking their phones. Senior political leaders are there, waiting.
Sounds pretty standard so far, like the opening scene of any political drama, right?
Yeah.
The kind of summit you'd see in Brussels or Abuja any day of the week.
Exactly. It sounds standard until the plane doors open.
Oh.
Because when those stairs come down, out step two of the most significant power players in Somalia. Jubaland President Ahmed Mohamed Islam and Puntland President Said Abdullah Deni. But, and here's the kicker, they are not just carrying briefcases.
No, they are flanked immediately by heavily armed commandos.
And we're not talking about a couple of guys in suits with earpieces.
Not at all. We're talking combat-ready units. The visual is just, it's jarring. You have all the pomp and circumstance of a state visit, the handshakes, the smiles, and it's clashing right up against the raw look of a combat zone.
It's diplomacy with the safety catch-off.
That is the perfect way to describe it. And that one visual, MPs in their nice suits standing next to soldiers with their fingers near the trigger, that tells you everything you need to know about where Somali politics are right now.
So today on the deep dive, we're unpacking this exact moment. We're going to look at why these two regional presidents have shown up in Mogadishu, what's at stake with the country's upcoming elections, and, well, why that scene at the airport is a massive flashing red light for the stability of the whole region.
And we're really going to tackle the big quibble that's sort of hiding underneath all of this. Can you actually solve a deep political impasse when the negotiators, they clearly don't trust each other enough to leave their personal armies at home?
It's the ultimate trust exercise, isn't it? And from the looks of it, they're failing.
But let's stay on that arrival for a second, because the sources we're looking at really hammer home the symbolism.
Mm-hmm.
Normally, when a regional leader visits a national capital, a governor going to Washington, D.C., a premier to Berlin, there's a protocol.
There is. You enter the jurisdiction of the federal government, and they provide your security.
Right.
It's a symbolic act. It's a way of saying, we're all on the same team, one state, and I trust that state to protect me. By bringing their own security forces, and specifically commandos loyal only to them, Presidents Islam and Deni are sending a message that's way louder than any speech they could give.
They're saying, we recognize the geography of Mogadishu, but we do not trust the landlord.
That's it, exactly. They are saying, we're here to talk, but we don't trust you to keep us safe. Or maybe something even darker.
Like what?
Like, we don't trust that you won't try to arrest us. It turns a political visit into a security standoff from minute one. I mean, what a heavy atmosphere to start a negotiation in. So great to see you. Let's talk about the country's future, but please ignore the guy with the machine gun behind my chair.
It definitely kills the vibe of a friendly fireside chat. But the context here is everything. You have to remember, these two leaders have basically been boycotting the capital.
Right. This is the first time they've been back for a while.
For a long while. They've been in a kind of cold war with the federal government.
Yeah.
This is the first time they've set foot in Mogadishu since their big dispute went public.
So the fact they're even there is a breakthrough.
It's huge. It signals that the ice is breaking. But the commandos tell you that the ice is very, very thin, and they're terrified of falling through.
So what changed? Why show up now after staying away for so long?
The calendar. In politics, nothing focuses the mind like a deadline. The sources are all very clear. The terms of President Hassan Sheikh Mohammed and the federal parliament are expiring in the coming months.
That phrase, in the coming months, always makes me nervous in political reporting. It implies a ticking clock, but no one knows what time it is.
And that ambiguity is exactly where this whole conflict lives. See, the president, Hassan Sheikh Mohammed, he has a plan, or at least he has a pledge he keeps making. He's repeatedly promised to hold a one-person, one-vote election before his mandate is up.
Right, let's unpack that. One person, one vote. To anyone listening, especially from a Western democracy, that just sounds normal. It sounds like the absolute bare minimum for an election. Why is that a big deal?
Theoretically, it's the gold standard. It's what everyone says they want, universal suffrage. But this is where you have to look at the huge gap between the rhetoric and the reality on the ground.
The infrastructure just isn't there, I'm guessing.
That is putting it mildly. To hold a real one-person, one-vote election, think of what you need. A census, right? You need to know how many people live where.
Somalia hasn't had one of those in
No.
decades.
Decades. So you don't even know how many ballots to print. Then you need voter registration, biometrics to stop fraud, secure polling stations that everyone can get to.
Yeah.
And you have to remember, huge parts of the country are still controlled or contested by al-Shabaab.
So when the president says we're holding a universal vote in a few months, the experts are just looking at the logistics and saying, how? That's physically impossible.
It's a moonshot, but he hasn't even built the rocket. And on top of all that, and this is key, there's an absence of a broad national agreement on how this election should even work. You can't just declare it if states like Puntland and Jubaland aren't on board.
Okay, so this brings us to the opposition's perspective. If I'm sitting in Jubaland and I hear the president promise something that seems impossible, what am I thinking? Am I thinking he's just an optimist?
No, you think he's setting a trap.
A trap? How can promising democracy be a trap?
This is the absolute core of the friction. The opposition, which isn't just these two presidents, but also a group called the Somali Future Council, they believe the federal leadership knows perfectly well that a one-person, one-vote election is impossible right now.
So, why keep promising it then?
To create confusion, to engineer a delay. The opposition is accusing the federal government of planning to use the inevitable logistical failure as an excuse for a term extension.
Okay, I get it. The logic is, we can't hold the election yet because we're not ready for the perfect democratic system I promised. So I guess I'll just have to stay in power a little longer until we are ready.
Precisely. It is extension via confusion. The opposition sees this grand democratic promise not as an ideal, but as a cynical tool to stay in office past the constitutional deadline. They've consistently warned against such a move.
And there's a specific term for it, right?
Yes. Mudo karatsi, term extension. In Somali politics, those are fighting words.
It's just a fascinating inversion. Usually you see opposition groups demanding more democracy, and the government is dragging its feet. Here, the government is waving the democracy banner, and the opposition is saying, whoa, stop, you're using that to trick us.
It's a total paradox. But it makes perfect sense when you factor in that trust deficit. If you don't trust the leader's motives, even a good policy can look like a weapon. The opposition would argue they're actually defending the Constitution by preventing this power grab that's masked as reform.
And they'd rather stick to the old, indirect system.
They'd rather have a predictable transfer of power.
Yeah.
Even if the old way, where clan elders pick MPs, who then pick the president, is flawed, and it's a known process. It guarantees the president leaves office on time. For them, the certainty of the transfer is more important than the method of the vote.
And this mistrust isn't just paranoia. The source material talks about this ghost of 2021 haunting these talks.
Yes. You absolutely cannot understand the commandos at the airport today without understanding what happened in 2021. It's the trauma that's informing every single move these leaders are making right now.
So what happened then? Take us back.
It was a remarkably similar situation. The previous president, Farmajo, his mandate was expiring. There was a huge fight over the electoral model. The negotiations were going nowhere.
And when the talks broke down, it wasn't just angry press releases.
No. The political failure became a military crisis. The national security forces, they basically splintered. You had army units loyal to the government and other units loyal to the opposition or to specific clans.
And they started fighting each other?
In the heart of Mogadishu. There were armed confrontations in the streets. Civilians were fleeing their homes. It was days of unrest. It wasn't a protest. It was low-level urban warfare. The whole state looked like it was about to collapse.
That's a chilling precedent.
It is. And that's why this history matters so much. The current uncertainty almost perfectly mirrors those previous talks. Expiring mandate, dispute over the electoral model, total breakdown of trust.
And suddenly those heavily armed commandos make a lot more sense. They're not just there for show.
No, they're an insurance policy. Presidents Islam and Dini are saying, we remember 2021. We remember when government security forces turned on the opposition. We will not be vulnerable this time.
It just raises the stakes incredibly high. These leaders are sitting in a room supposedly to talk about ballots and voting, but the memory of bullets is right there in the room with them.
And that's the tension. This visit is driven by urgency, by the ticking clock, but the outcome is completely up in the air.
What about the international community in all this? The sources say these talks are being encouraged by international partners.
Which is, the diplomatic code for the donors are freaking out.
Right. The UN, the US, the EU, they're always the nervous chaperones in these situations.
Well, they've invested billions in Somalia's security and state building. They are desperate to prevent further political deterioration. They know that al-Shabaab thrives on this kind of political chaos. If the government and the states are fighting each other, they're not fighting the terrorists.
So they're pushing them into the room saying, figure this out before the whole house burns down.
Basically, yes. And it seems like we are at a fork in the road. There are really two scenarios here.
Okay, let's take scenario one, the good one.
Scenario one is success. They find a compromise, they resolve the impasse. Maybe the president agrees that one person, one vote isn't possible everywhere yet, so they do a hybrid model. Or they agree on a strict, guaranteed timeline for an election, even if it's delayed months.
Handshakes, commanders get back on the plane, crisis averted.
That's the hope.
And scenario two.
Failure. The talks fall apart just like in 2021. The president insists on his plan, the regional leaders walk out. The mandate expires with no deal in place. The opposition declares the government illegitimate.
And then we risk seeing that unrest, those armed clashes, back on the streets of Mogadishu.
That's the fear. It really feels like a coin toss right now.
Yeah.
What's tragic is that both sides probably want to avoid violence. Nobody wins in a civil conflict. But the political cost of backing down, of looking weak, it's seen as existential.
So to wrap this up, we've got leaders in Mogadishu, a clock ticking down, a huge fight over how to run an election, and the trust is so low that the guest list included special forces.
That sums it up perfectly. The goal is supposed to be a peaceful, democratic election. But the immediate problem isn't about counting votes. It's about preventing the political dispute from turning into a physical one.
It's a stark reminder that before you can even have democracy, you need a basic level of stability. And right now, stability looks very, very fragile in Mogadishu.
It hangs by a thread. What happens in these negotiations over the next few days will likely determine the path of the country for the next 4 years.
We'll be watching very closely to see if those commandos stay at the airport.
Let's hope they do.
So before we go, I just want to leave you with one final thought. We talk a lot about compromise in politics, about meeting halfway, about building trust. But here's the question this whole situation raises for me. If you have to bring heavily harmed commandos to the negotiating table just to feel safe enough to talk, half the talks already failed before they even began. Or, and this is the flip side, in a world with this much mistrust and this much traumatic history, is that show of force actually the only thing that makes the talks possible in the first place?
That is the million-dollar question, isn't it?
Yeah.
And we probably won't know the answer until we see who walks out of that room, what they've agreed to.
Something to think about. That's it for this deep dive. Thanks for listening and stay curious.